welcome everybody and welcome to Bridges and BAMEOTUK UK's collaboration on White Ally. We're really excited to bring this to you. The genesis of this is really coming out of the webinar that we did back in August on our cultural inequalities webinar. And we just really want to keep the conversation going about how we can be better at driving out racism and prejudice in our society and in particular healthcare as well. So we've got a fantastic panel for you today. I am Scott from Bridges, and I'm just going to give you a really quick basic definition of allyship. An ally is a noun, and it is somebody who helps and supports somebody else. So that's a really basic definition of an ally, and we're really going to try and dig into that a bit more today. So we've got a crack panel with us today, and I'm going to get our panel to introduce themselves and a bit about themselves and their ethnicity. So Mish is my co-host today. So Mish, can you introduce yourself, please?
Hello everybody, my name is Ahmed-Landeryou. I like to be called Mish. I am British, Bangladeshi, Asian. I'm a cisgender woman and my pronouns are she and her.
Brilliant. And John, can you introduce yourself, please?
Hello, and I'm John Hammond, and I am white, Australian, if you like, whatever that means, colonial, I suppose. And also I identify as a gay man, cis, mostly gendered, if you understand what that means. And it means that I identify mostly with the gender that I was assigned at birth, but sometimes feel that that's not quite appropriate for me. And I suppose I work in higher education in St George's University of London as an academic in supporting physiotherapy and occupational therapy students through education, and other students too.
Brilliant. And Rachel, could you introduce yourself, please?
Hi everyone, my name is Rachael Moses. I am a white, British, very proud Geordie female with pronouns she, her, hers. I am a consultant respiratory physiotherapist by background and associate director of rehabilitation and therapies at the Royal Brompton. I am a very proud rainbow wearing part of the LGBTQI+ community. So thank you for having me today.
You're welcome. And Sean.
Hi, my name's Sean Pert, pronouns he, him. I'm a gay man. I was born in a mining town and I was expected to go down a pit, and that was such good motivation to pass my A-levels and go to university, the first person in my family to do so. So I now work as a senior lecturer at the University of Manchester, teaching speech and language therapy students, and I work as one day a week as a consultant on the new primary care-based trans health service in Greater Manchester.
Brilliant. And yeah, as I said, I'm Scott. I work for Bridges Self-Management. I am also white British, and my pronouns are he and him as well. So we've got a couple of questions that we want to put to our panelists today, and just to kind of kick some conversation off. So the first one of those is, what does allyship mean to you? So Sean, let's start with you. What does allyship mean to you?
I think allyship of all types really is creating a safe environment for everybody, and really seeing that whether it's racism, whether it's transphobia, whether it's classist behaviour, as we've seen in the newspapers recently, and lots of those things kind of intersect. So sometimes you get people with all those characteristics. They might not be in the room when people act in ways that might be offensive. And as an ally, I feel that I should challenge people if they use language that isn't inclusive, if they say things that I think might be offensive, because that way society is always in the room. And I think in a professional environment particularly, we get so much more engagement from students, from colleagues, from Black, Asian and minority ethnic backgrounds and from LGBTQ plus people when they feel comfortable, because in order to be your best self, you need an environment where you can bring your whole self to work. And if that doesn't exist for one person, it doesn't exist for anybody. So I think it's a kind of moral responsibility that we are all able to be inclusive and to really stand up against negativity of any group.
Yeah, I was just going to add on to that. I think you've really highlighted to me, Sean, that actually I think I've been on a bit of a journey. And some of the things you were talking about is about saying something even if people are not in the room. I have, not proudly, let some of those things pass in my past. And in a recent past, I must admit, because I thought it's easier to not say anything. Let's not rock the boat. And this has been with colleagues, this has been with friends, this has been with students when they're on placement having difficult times because something's been said that may be perceived as racist. And I've said, oh, let's just get you through your placement sort of thing. It's those sorts of conversations that you have. But I'm starting to recognize that's not really being an ally as I see it now. Being an ally is stepping in, acknowledging, saying something, indicating that it's not appropriate. It may not be dealt with at that time, but there's this kind of indicating that something is not quite right and that we need to kind of discuss, challenge, or do something about it. So I think it's kind of that acknowledgement and showing that you are willing to do something and supporting the individual, if there is an individual in the room that is being the victim of some sort of discriminatory kind of language. And I suppose that's just in language, but it can happen in multiple ways.
John, I can't, I agree with you so much. I agree with you so much because look, I'm guilty of it too, right? Because I just wanted to be invisible. I didn't want to rock the boat. Just let me get on with my job and not deal with this racism because it's too painful. It'll open the doors to too many things. I don't want to get into it. And my best friend is this wonderful Irish occupational therapist, but she was my student and we still have discussions about how I told her to be less Irish so she could pass a placement. I said to her, you know, we're not going to win this one. Nobody is with us. Nobody is with us. Nobody's listening to us. So we've got to survive this placement. And the only way I can see it forward is for you to be like me. Start to be invisible. Start to survive by not being seen. And, you know, and it still hurts us because we're still talking about it so many years later that happened. So, you know, I haven't been a good ally in the past. And just because I'm not white doesn't mean I haven't been complicit in some of this as well. But it's about survival. It's about not feeling the pain. It's about taking care of yourself and being quite selfish. And then because you just know that around you, the environment is not supportive. You know, it's fear. It's fear.
And I probably just want to add on to that. I think, yes, we've been complicit, but I think perhaps the way I think of being an ally now is trying to challenge things within the workplace, not necessarily people, but things. So policies that might inherently be institutionally racist or supporting those that are already privileged, which there's many of. So it's just trying to really identify where they might be and going, should we do something about that policy? Because we need to kind of really look and see whether who is more privileged within it than others. So it's starting to dismantle some of that within organisations.
I'm so pleased you've talked about that mission, John, because I think something that might hold somebody back is, let's face it, shame that you've allowed these things to happen. And you think, well, it's too late now. I kind of will let it go. It's never, as the big kind of shift in our culture is now showing, it's never too late to kind of go, actually, I now realize that if I do let things go, it doesn't actually help in the long run. It just kind of turns into this open emotional sore that we kind of have to kind of tolerate, and actually it just gets worse. So I think the fact that there'll be lots of people listening who have done, will be nodding along going, there's a particular manager or a particular person I work with who's just, I couldn't live life if I don't, but that doesn't mean to say that you can't get support from other people. And it doesn't mean to say that just because you might have been doing this for years and years, you can't start to gently challenge and start to gain confidence in being an ally. And I think it's a really good point that there are days, hours, times that you might feel really vulnerable yourself, and you might need to seek support outside the immediate situation, because I think it's a bit like, we say to people, don't put yourself in harm. There's psychological harm as well, isn't there? And you've got to kind of be strong enough and in a calm enough way. I mean, sometimes I've been so angry, I think if I say something, it won't be professional or appropriate, but you might come back to it at a later time.
Rachel, do you have any kind of thoughts on what allyship means to you?
Oh, I have so many, Scott. I've got so many. I'm just sitting here listening to you. So I don't really know which direction to take this in. This is totally unprepared from all of us. I suppose if I start by answering the question, which is what is being a good ally, and you can't really answer that. And first of all, I don't know if I am a good ally. I mean, some people have said it. I think I'm always trying to be better. I'm trying to always be a better person. I can't answer that question without talking about my journey, which I know we'll talk about. Thinking about a very senior clinical leader that I am and a senior manager, I always assume that racism is everywhere all of the time. So I assume that racism is an everyday thing for my colleagues of colour, for my patients of colour, for the people that I manage. And I always then try and look for it. I actively seek it out. And what I've done in the old days, I wouldn't have done that. I might have not allowed it, like John said, and I might have, if I heard something, I would have called it out. And certainly as I got more confident. But I think one of the reasons why people don't do that is because they're fearful of losing something. And that comes with understanding what your privilege is, and in particular, your white privilege, if you are white. And only then when you're willing to sacrifice the privilege that you've been born with, that other people haven't, only when you're prepared to take the risks to lose something that you've automatically inherited, then can you start to see things from a different light. I hope I'm explaining this in the right way. As we get higher up the food chain or the management chain, or however we want to define it, then becomes more power, because you have positional power. But this starts all the way through your school, your university days. And this is what some of the great stuff we're starting to see in undergraduate education about how we can start to empower people to have that anti-racist voice. And all you have to do is put in Google, like, how can you be a good ally? And all of these things will come up, but they're all words. And we'll talk about being anti-racist, and we'll talk about learning about white privilege. But, words are meaningless unless there's action that comes behind them. And I suppose being a good ally is someone who understands all of that, but then is prepared to action it. But with action in this field always comes sacrifice. And it's only when you're prepared to do that will you make the difference. I've wrote loads of things down just as these two fellas have been speaking. So I don't know if you just want us to leave it there and move on to the next bit.
Yeah, unless anybody else has anything else to add on.
I just want to add that, we can start being an ally from today if you haven't. It doesn't matter what you've done in the past. It really doesn't. If your intention is that you want to change and you want to be an ally, you want to call out anything that's anti-racist, you want to call out anything that's racist and be anti-racist, or you want to be anti-transphobic, you can start doing that right now. And there is no shame in having history. You know, we can't stop the past, it happened, but it's about what we do now and move forward. And that's what I'm doing. Yes, I feel shame and fear and guilt of everything that I haven't done until this point. But I know now I'm not going to keep quiet. I know Rachel knows that, she's on my Twitter, but I'm not going to keep quiet. And I need allies, people who are white and in places of influence and power, because I'm not there and I can't get there at the moment, but I need to join with the people that are, so they can hear us and they have the influence and power to change. So you're not alone.
Yeah.
So our next kind of topic of conversation is, has it been challenging, or what has been challenging about being an ally, and whether we consider ourselves to be allies or not. Let's say for the topic of this discussion that we are all allies. You know, what have you you know, what has maybe been challenging about being an ally? So Rachel, let's maybe start with you about some of the things that you found challenging, and we'll jump off of what you say.
Okay, well, if I start very selfishly, but the reason I'm doing this is because hopefully it will relate to those white clinicians and managers that may be listening to this. So the personal challenges for me were acknowledging the uncomfortable truths, a bit like what John and Sean have just said, in the past. So whether that be understanding my white privilege, I mean, you go through feelings of guilt. It's not really about guilt, it's about understanding the concept and acknowledging that you have inherent privilege. You then go through almost denial phase by thinking, oh, well, I'm not racist. And you do all of the classic things, you know, like, you know, I'm in a mixed race marriage. So I was like, you know, I can't be racist. So, but that's not enough. It's understanding the concept of racism and how you have never experienced it and you will never know what it's like to experience in it, and what then you can do to help other people that have, especially as you go through your journey in life, as a friend, as a relative, as a colleague, as someone who looks after patients. So then it's acknowledging how you're going to change, because like Mish said, everyone's journey is not going to be the same and everyone doesn't need to change in the same way. There's not a rule book around this. It's about you feeling comfortable and acknowledging your own biases. So for me, one of the big turning points was me leaving Newcastle, which was very, very like white heteronormative at the time, going to St. George's in Tooting, which is very diverse, very multicultural. I mean, that's where I met John. And I suddenly looked at my like interview techniques, and without going into too much detail, realized as a manager, I employed people like me and people that looked like me, people that, you know, maybe not sounded like me anymore, but literally who had my work ethic, who were like bang, 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 loud, confident. And I sat down with a physio and an OT separately, actually, and then started doing that with students on the back of John's work. And just really started to listen, say, look, how has your experience been? How does this work for you? Tell me about your troubles. And once I started to listen and actively listen, that's the thing. It's about actively listening and caring, not asking the question. And it's hard to ask the question, like as a white person, to someone from colour who's had potentially this trauma, lived experience of racism. Systemic racism exists throughout our society. We see that now, it's so visible. But there's so much hidden racism that goes on that I would never know or see. So it's about listening to people's stories, acknowledging, apologising. I mean, Yvonne's 7 C's is just perfect for this. You know, we have the tools now. Back then, which was maybe like 8 years ago when I started my proper journey, was about reading books, lots of books that are coming out now and on reading lists. But really just then search, at the time I just searched the internet and, you know, asked people of colour. It's amazing how many people of colour read books about anti-racism. And that really shocked me at first, because I thought, well, why do you need to read these books? They're for people like me. And they said, because it helps us to conceptualize and understand as well. And that just again made me feel so bad, because I was like, my goodness, these people have experienced this horrific racism, and yet they are continuing to educate themselves about something society forces upon them because of the color of their skin. And I think for me that was the challenges around that, or that is such a long journey for someone who's grew up in a very British white, like, you know, normative environment. And it's very much like the so what factor. So the challenge that I have now, moving it on, is how I see my white colleagues who are just not interested in starting this journey. So thank you for everyone for listening to this, because this is your first start. And, you know, yes, it's challenging and it's hard, but it's not half as hard as what other people will have been through. And it is going to be a little bit challenging to yourself, but there's lots of support out there. There's lots of information. There's people like me who you can reach out to and ask a question. But if you're genuine and you genuinely care and you genuinely want to be better and you genuinely want to be an ally, then you won't get it wrong. You won't get it wrong if you're genuine and authentic. And if you ask the wrong question, believe me, someone will tell you. I've been told multiple times about the word that I might use or how I might phrase something. You know, I don't speak proper anyway. So it's all of them things about being prepared to take the risk and then sacrifice yourself for it. I've just said loads there, so I'm going to mute now.
I'll just follow up from you, Rachel, because I think, you know, history, working with any people, you kind of find that some are really, what I like to kind of phrase is they're really happy to lean in. They just kind of get in there and get stuck in. So if something comes up and there's a kind of, you know, around allyship, for example, there will be some people that are already there. You don't really need to do any work, they're just there. Then there's others that, you know, and I've been in this situation that perhaps would be, oh, not sure what to do. How will I kind of do? So they kind of sit back and wait for that nudge, I guess. But the sitting back is also, it's complicit with racism. Silence is oppression, if you like. So kind of, I know people are well-intended, but they're not sure how to do it. And I just like to say, you know, just give a little nudge. So, you know, little things, just try, lean in. You're going to make mistakes, like you said, Rachel. But it's okay. It's better to be showing that you're trying. And another thing about that, about trying, is that actually, I think from my perspective as an ally, I think I probably initially felt, oh, you know, you start to have those thoughts about, oh my God, this is horrible, we must do something about it. But I started to kind of have a bit of a deficit model. I think, oh, I need to support the students or need to support my colleagues. So jump in to support them. But actually, I think my role is more important, like you say, to be working with my colleagues of privilege to try and help them to act differently, rather than seeing that I need to jump in and save a student or save a colleague of colour. It's more than I need to kind of step in and use my privilege to challenge things. I'm going to use an example. Sorry, I'm jumping onto an example, but I'm part of a group at our organisation writing an anti-racist policy. Now, that is one of the hardest things you will ever do, because an anti-racist policy is almost against a policy. I don't know whether you've, because it's almost saying, well, a policy is very white, isn't it? Those have been by white people over years and years. So when you write an anti-racist policy, you're almost saying we're challenging the policy notion and concept. So I had a meeting where we drafted something, and then people in the group were saying, oh, we need to go and get it checked by so-and-so. This person needs to sign it off. And I'm going, that's kind of doing the things that we're saying we're trying to challenge. And people were listening to me, but they weren't listening to some of my other Black and minority ethnic colleagues. And I recognized in that meeting, and I had to call it out and say, I think you're only listening to me because I'm white. I think we need to listen to our other colleagues in the room and say that we cannot do this. And then we could, I suppose that's where I was using my allyship in that sort of moment to kind of challenge what I perceived as being my privilege, being authorized and others not being listened to. I've talked a lot there, sorry.
Sean, do you have any thoughts on what's been challenging for you as an ally?
Yeah, I think be prepared for people to say that you are over-egging it, that you're exaggerating, that you're making a big deal out of things. I mean, I remember something as simple as a speech and language therapist, working with people who speak other languages, who are often people of colour, not always, but often, and working with interpreters. And even that phrase, so many people say, I use an interpreter. I go, I don't, I work with them because they're highly skilled people and I'm not using them. They know more than I do about this language. So I work with or alongside an interpreter. And then I get people saying, well, my manager says it costs a lot of money and, you know, you have to really think hard before you work with interpreters. And I said, no, it's very clear. We have professional standards. And then I stopped saying that. I stopped saying, well, you know, it's our professional standards and we should do this and it's written in, you know, guidance. And I started saying things like, if you were living abroad and a German therapist said, your child's language problems caused by speaking that daft language English, stop it and only speak German, what would you say? And they go, well, I tell them that's ridiculous. And I said, so why don't your people, you know, your clients who speak Mepri and Sylheti say that to us? Because you're in a position of power and you're saying to people, your language and your culture isn't really worth anything in this context. We really don't value it. And 97% of speech therapists are lovely, white, middle-class, helpful women who don't think they're racist. But they routinely, not all of them, but quite a big proportion of them, don't fight that first barrier of, oh, interpreters might cost money. And it's just a really clear example to me of, yes, someone might say, oh, you're making a fuss here. You know, you're kind of, you're demanding something that costs real cash, you know, to the health service or to social services. But I think the thing is, I know that my clients won't be able to stand up to this huge amount of institutional and white privilege that people have by screaming at people by their very existence that only English matters in this country. Now, it's nonsense. All the research shows that if you speak another language at home, it supports the acquisition of English as an additional language, that the children, if they've got a language problem, if we support them in a home language, they develop English much quicker and much better. So there's no evidence for this, and yet routinely for the last 25 years, people have said to me, oh, you know, it's really hard to get interpreters. And I think it's just a good example of, we are professionals, we are in positions of power, and we constantly have to challenge that assumption that we are being, you know, if it's a bit like, you know, I did some work for on the guidelines for Royal College about bilingualism, and several colleagues of various descriptions, not just speech and language therapists, said, is this really needed? Isn't this obvious? And I thought, well, if it weren't needed, then I wouldn't have to write it, and I wouldn't have to take calls from therapists saying we're being denied something incredibly basic like the ability to speak. And I'll just round it up with a story that my own mum said, why do Asian people all live in this area together? And I said, well, you know, when you lived in Gran Canaria, you lived in that place with all the English people. Why did you do that? well, I could have a chat to next door and I could get food I liked. And I went, that reason, mother, that reason. And I think it's just getting people to kind of realise that we all behave in ways where we feel comfortable, where we can have our culture recognised and valued. And it's just using those examples and thinking, how can I empathise with my client? What would it feel like to not speak much English or to have to explain a different way of living to this white privileged person? And we can think that way, we'll become better.
Mish, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I think what I'm learning as well, as I'm becoming more active, as I'm becoming an educational activist, is something that one of my students called me. I don't feel it. I don't feel like I have that honor yet. But what I'm starting to understand is that we're still bringing in processes to take us away further from the work of being allies or being anti-racist. You know, I always think about Athena Swan and the Race Equality Charter, which I think are great instruments for finding out what's not working. And I say to myself, well, we've got a act of law, the Equality Act 2010. Why aren't we measuring ourselves against that? That already exists. And there's points of law in that. Why aren't we measuring ourselves against that? So, and I have those conversations with allies like, oh yeah, you know, race equality charter, forget that, that will show us. And I think, okay, you know, those things, people say hold people to account, but actually the law holds people to account. Why aren't we just looking at the law and saying, okay, this is unlawful. There's someone who speaks a different language and they're trying to get equitable access to a service, and you're saying you won't do that thing that needs being done. That's unlawful. But no one will raise that because the people, and I'm going to say again, in the white power spaces, just keep stump. Don't say anything. But it's unlawful. Why isn't anyone saying that? Why isn't anyone calling that out? Because the people in the power spaces are keeping quiet and we can't influence them. We can't influence them. And I think about, I've learned that saying the words white supremacist, decolonizing, these are words that actually, and people are going to say, oh, well, you have to say them. But I can say them, but I can say them and explain them at the same time. Like I started talking about decolonizing and I could see fear in people's faces it was on an educational platform. And I started saying, well, let's just look at the easy thing, which is the reading list. It's all white and it's mostly male. So even gender diversity isn't there. And also, we're occupational therapists and we talk about social justice, inclusivity. We talk about different cultural perspectives as tools to enable our therapy. Yet everything we've got on the reading list is Western centric and very white. So then I started thinking, okay, words, I need to engage people into allyship. And it's not about making it more acceptable. You know, someone accused me of that, oh, you're just trying to make racism more acceptable or you know, decolonization more acceptable. And I said, well, I really want to, I see this person in front of me, or I see a group in front of me, and they want to be allies, but they're also fearful, but also don't understand. So why not I use accessible language like internationalization for decolonization to talk about why supremacy is talking about institutional racism. Why don't I use the words of these policies and procedures are making you face in a racist way or behave in a racist way. So let's look at these policies and procedures. I'm not accusing you. I'm saying you're the product of something that is happening and you're going along with it because you haven't seen it yet. And I think we need to start engaging people who genuinely want to engage with us, but suddenly we use the word white supremacist or decolonisation, and they take it to somewhere else where it isn't. So we do need to start explaining in accessible language. Isn't that part of what we do as educators and therapists anyway? You try and use accessible language to explain things. And I know I put people off, or I trigger people when I say that. But the thing is, I want to create a big collective of people that want to be allies, that want to be anti-racist, that want to dismantle, disrupt institutional racism, because I cannot do it on my own as a brown person.
It's so powerful. Thank you, Mish. So we've already touched on some examples. Does anyone else have any other examples that they would like to share of you know, other ways that they've been using some of their allyship?
Yeah, I can come in here, Scott, and I just want to pick up on Mish's point about the Equality Act. I mean, it is just not fit for purpose for the 9 protected characteristics under the Act, which is now over 10 years old and defunct. You've hit the nail on the head about why it's not legally acted upon, because that would be too much trouble and everyone would be in a lot of trouble. And it doesn't address people with multiple protected characteristics as well, which is a real problem. And this is about gender, it's about race, it's about sexuality, it's a disability, it's everything. So that's a whole podcast in itself, isn't it? But I completely agree with you. As a white person, it is completely not fit for purpose. Now, if I think of from a senior manager, and I think if we start moving on to tips about being an ally, and I'm not an expert on this, right? And I don't claim to be, and I'll continue to get lots of things wrong, I'm sure. I'll try my best not to, but some of the things that I tend in my position now, you know, someone who gets invited to speak, someone who gets invited to conferences, someone who gets an invite to the table all of the time, right? I want to share those responsibilities and opportunities now. So not everyone will always want to take them off me. Not everyone will want to share them with me. So often I'll say, if that's the case, well, come with me, do it with me jointly, be there with me. And then we'll make almost like, not mentorship, because I think you don't want to disrespect people's intelligence, because it's not an intelligence thing, it's just an opportunity. It's being handed the same opportunities as someone like me has. And recognizing that there's people of colour who are more than capable, and often much more capable than me. I'm telling you now, much more cleverer, much more articulate, much more, they just haven't been afforded the same opportunities as me. So that's what I do. I think social justice is very real. So like John and Sean and Mish have all said, like calling things out, but then actually what's the next step from there? It's about getting justice for that situation or that individual. There's always going to be gains and losses. So as a manager, the frustrating thing when I try and offer teams, whichever team I've worked in, even with the podcast stuff we've been doing, people are given that time for free, talking about stuff that's affected them for their entire life, providing it for free, openly accessible, and people still don't want to engage in because it doesn't affect them. It doesn't affect their life. It doesn't affect the opportunities they'll get. That frustrates me, because I'm like, if now is not the time to learn about racial inequality, about systemic oppression, about institutional racism, when is the time? Because now is the time, like Mish says, and if you haven't been on your journey yet, now is the time to do it, because there's so much around, and only will that create lasting change for everyone. We cannot go back to the years that we've seen before. We cannot go back. George Floyd isn't the first, and sadly won't be the last. And the Black Lives Matter campaign has been going on for a long time. And it's only now that it has the strength and momentum, sadly because of protests, sadly because yet another person has died, and because I think of the world of social media we live in. And of course, being the respiratory clinician I am, the devastating disparity findings from the Public Health England report, with known health inequalities have been there for years. The evidence is there. People from, people from Black, Asian, minority ethnic backgrounds, people from disabilities, people from LGBTQI plus background, all experience healthcare inequality more than white heteronormative people. So there is multiple avenues. Reach out to people that do stand up as allies, whether they be people of colour, whether they be white allies. Reach out to people. and help them on your personal journey. But you do need to take responsibility for it. You do need to buy books from people of colour. You know, they're authors. Invest in their literature. Listen to the webinars. Again, it's great you're here. And then, you know, DM people like me. There's lots of people like me out there, and just say, look, can I run this past you? That's the way that we need, that's the message that we need to be sending and encouraging, because we've all been there. Me, John, Sean, we've all been there. We've all been on this journey, and we're not at the end of it. We're there together.
John, Sean, anything else to add?
Oh, how do you follow Rachel?
Many have tried.
I think I just want to reiterate that I don't feel like I'm an expert. I still feel a novice in how I work, in terms of, I suppose even the word ally is new to me, because that's not how I would have described this even a year ago. If I'm quite honest, I kind of feel embarrassed because I probably have done less reading about allyship, and I don't think I've been on a course. But I've probably read more than I've actually been on a course or anything like that about allyship. And I'm here trying to develop things that are in curriculum for students based on my reading and working around. So I'm kind of new to this too. But I think the thing that probably people recognize from me is that I just lean in, I try, I will have a go. And I have had a go because I've recognised this in the field of physiotherapy, at least, for a number of years, but never really had the language. So I've used the language of research, which is privileged, to articulate some of the issues. And those issues are not new, but actually people feel like it's a discovery of something new. And it's like, no, but at least we've got it out there, and it's written in a language that is what white people understand and accept and acknowledge.
Can I just mention something before Sean comes in? One of the other things is about, if you're on a panel of something, if you're on a working group, if you get asked to speak at a conference, ask the question at that time, can I check the diversity of my panel? And it was a good friend of mine, Zun Puccineri, who said, Moses, you've got to put your money where your mouth is now. You know, if that's a white panel you're sitting on. And I thought, you know, he's absolutely right. So everything I do now, every boardroom I go into, every meeting, like working group, I just say, what is the diversity of the panel? And for some people, that's a more sensitive way, I suppose, of asking, is there any people of colour on the panel? Or it's about representation. So that's another thing for people in senior positions or in any stage of your career, to just, again, equal the playing field for people and provide those opportunities. It's not tokenistic. It's just about people. When you're surrounded by people that look like you, there'll be very slow change. And yeah, Sean, sorry, I know I've just spoken.
No, don't apologise. It's a fantastic point, Rachel. Thank you so much for bringing that up. I was just going to say, really, that particularly around my journey, because I've been fortunate enough to work with bilingual families, it's not really the bilingualism that's fascinating. It's the fact that I can be professionally nosy and ask about other people's ways of life. And I call it cultural inquisitiveness, because I don't think you can become culturally competent, because that suggests after, I don't know, 18 months you'll become competent, and that's complete nonsense. It's constant. But it's an absolute joy to find out about other people's ways of life and beliefs and culture. And it always surprises me, because, you know, Britain is famous now for being, you know, curry is the national dish. You know, everyone loves the curry. And yet, because I've been fortunate enough to work with people from the Pakistani heritage community, I've asked the names of some, and you know, aloo just means potato, and it's like, why is it people go for you know, for a French meal, they know more about French than they know about their favorite Asian meal? And I think it's just, we have this reserve when we go, you know, and me and my now retired colleague Carol, we were kind of infamous, I think is the word, for if we went anywhere where we encountered something different, we were really interested and we asked loads of questions. It's not very British, is it, to be, you know, to kind of be inquisitive. And I think that you can take that forward by reading, by finding out. And reading about the history of Britain, we are we are built on colonialism, right? You don't have to go very far before you encounter it. And I think it's, it's taught in such a way that you only find out about things as if they're nothing to do with each other. I worked in a town in Greater Manchester called Rochdale, and mill workers went on strike because of, in sympathy with the cotton workers. And I think, there's a long, fantastic British tradition of standing with people who are oppressed. But you have to educate yourself. You have to, once you've had that meal and you've talked to somebody who cooks that curry for you, why not go out and find out, why are there Asian people in this country? Well, because white people sent out recruitment managers to Pakistan, to poorest areas of Pakistan, and said, please work in our mills because white people don't want to anymore. Why are there lots of Afro-Caribbean people in Birmingham? Because we sent people over to ask them to drive buses. And then racists say, why are these people here? Well, our whole society was built on this racist assumption that, after the Second World War, when Britain was in ruins, let's get people over to help with the reconstruction. And as the Windrush scandal shows, people have short memories. People came over, contributed to society, became British citizens, and then people were faced with these racist assumptions that they don't belong here. And I think that says it all. If you can live and contribute to a society for decades, raise families, have grandchildren, for goodness sake, and then because of your skin colour and your heritage, people can question your right to be in this country. How would you feel if you were a white person and someone turns around and said to you, not only you, but your mum and maybe your gran shouldn't be here? It's absolutely outrageous, and people have no empathy with how that might feel, and I think that privilege that you feel secure in your own country isn't shared by people from different cultures. And we really need to educate ourselves as to why people feel afraid of racism. Why do they feel insecure in their own country? And that goes deep into the history of our community, really. So I think we really need to not rely on, I suppose that's where I'm coming from, really. It's okay to be interested and to be inquisitive and nosy like I am, but then you need to do the reading, you need to do the research, and educate yourself about our country, which is not very pleasant in its history, actually.
Mish, anything to add on that point?
No. Thank you, Sean. I feel a bit, in a way, emotional about what Sean says, because I think, I don't know, there's generational trauma that I experience, my dad experienced. My dad was a surgeon who came over in the 70s because Britain sent out an SOS because they didn't have enough doctors. So I remember my picture of coming from Africa to here, and I've got this bloody bonnet on that someone must have knitted for me, and it wasn't warm enough, and some little like knitted shawl I'm wearing under a summer dress, and I look miserable, and I'm thinking, what hell have my parents brought me to? And I still remember it. And I don't know if it's because I remember it because of the pictures or it's a genuine memory, but I was I think it was about 4 or maybe less than that. And I just remember that. And I remember coming from this wonderful United Nations campus in Tanzania where, all these different cultures mix, put into this council estate full of white people, and no one was welcoming. And it was only Nanny Lambert, this old woman, who kind of welcomed us and told us about her son and chess and everything. And I kind of learnt about a little bit because we were there a few years. And I remember her with such affection that she taught us about the history, the colonial history, and I remember my mum, me and my sister sitting there drinking tea and having cake, and her mad canary flying around trying to poo on us and telling us about the history and telling us joyfully about her son. And he was I can't remember his name, but he's a famous British chess player, and he was going around the world and the different things she was learning from him. And it was that intergenerational but intercultural mixing. She had no fear. She had no fear about us. Racism she knew about, but she wasn't racist against us. She wasn't being superficial and saying, oh, can you teach me about your food? She genuinely wanted to know who we are and where we were from, and had that understanding, not because she was well-traveled, because her son was well-traveled. And this race, culture, class, colonialism is so hidden now. That's the problem. It's so hidden within British culture. To try and pull it out and make people see it, it's a hard struggle. It's a hard struggle for people who are white and understand it, let alone people of colour. And the thing about, Rachel, you said about the Equality Act not being fit for purpose. I mean, it is under review right now, under looking at class and social mobility, because it doesn't capture that at all. Even the things, like you said, it does capture, it hasn't got enough force behind it, so they're looking at that. We're in a perfect storm for change now, because we've had COVID-19, the laws are being looked at, the science is saying, don't be racist and use science to back up your racism. It doesn't exist, and society is ready. So if we don't capitalize on this perfect storm of change, we'll lose it again, and we'll be quiet again until the next murder.
Can I just come in there? Sorry, Scott.
No, it's fine.
On just capitalising on what Mish has said there. So take an opportunity whenever you can as the white manager. So it's obviously been Remembrance Sunday. It's Remembrance Day on Wednesday. I send an email around to say to staff, please, if staff and your patients want to observe 2 minutes silence, please be mindful of that. Also, it's Diwali, down on Saturday. And that's a 4-day celebration. And for a lot of people, that's such an important celebration, as important as Christmas. And in a lot of households, Christmas and Diwali is celebrated as an equal. And if you do not know what that festival and that celebration is around, please go and look. I'll post some stuff online. And I don't know when this podcast's going out, but send an email to your staff and say, look, it's Diwali. Like, this is going to mean so much. Here's some links, learn about it. Maybe even go one step further and get some, traditional sweets in. You will have to order them like now or tomorrow, because they'll just be sold out. Tooting is excellent for this. How many shops in Tooting? We used to do this for our teams in Tooting because there's so many great stores. So yeah, and then it's not just that, it's just other calendars. If you don't know what events are, Google them or ask someone. And like Mish said about British society, we'll all celebrate those normal traditional British holidays or festivals, but actually let's expand our cultural knowledge and let's start doing that as, predominantly white managers. Or if you're a manager from, a non-British white background, if you are someone from Black, Asian, minority ethnic background, have the confidence to say, look, we're going to start celebrating these as well. Because I think that oppression, saying, actually, I've stopped telling people. To give you an example, I've got one amazing member of staff who's doing some cultural awareness stuff in my trust. And she said, Rachel, I used to bring sweets in every year. I used to really make a fuss, but, they used to get thrown out. People didn't want to eat them. One person, he was even overheard saying, I don't like this foreign food. So obviously if I was here, then I would have addressed that, but it just wasn't addressed. So I think use the opportunities that exist. And do you know what it is? You'll actually learn loads. I mean, the Festival of Light, good over evil, to appreciate the light, you have to see the darkness. And I just think all of those things are so transferable into us being better people and having better lives. We're missing a trick here, learning from other cultures. I'm telling you now.
Yeah, well, that would have been a great place to end, but I want to get some more tips from everyone as to kind of what they plan to do over the next couple of months. Because one of the things we really like to do at Bridges is, because some of this can feel a bit, I would imagine some of this will feel a bit overwhelming to people, even still after everything that you've all spoken about. You know, will still feel overwhelming to people. So what we like to do at Bridges is to take something that can feel like a big overwhelming kind of goal and break it down. So I'd really like to kind of find out from you guys what you know, what you would like to do over the next couple of months in terms of your allyship powers, and what you would like to do in terms of your allyship. So Rachel, that was some brilliant stuff that you're looking to even do over the next couple of days. Sean, is there anything that you're looking to do kind of practically in terms of allyship over the next couple of months?
Thanks, Scott. I think one of the things that people often say when they see people who are more senior, so like I'm a lecturer, I'm a specialist therapist, people go, oh, it's easy for you because you're in a position of power. And I'm thinking, well, it doesn't seem like 5 minutes ago when I was a new starter and I felt powerless. But I always remember one of my first students saying, you know, we were really like inspired by what you said about standing up, you know, thinking about finding out cultural things, you know, taking time, you know, even that I spent in sessions with clients saying, tell me about the languages you speak, tell me about the cultural things that are important to you, tell me about your religion. And that was an important part of case history taking, of interviewing, because that was really going to affect your intervention and the way you were working with this family, whether they were bilingual or not. And I think just by being a professional, you are a role model and you're going to really impact on lots of people around you, even if you don't know it. So even a very small thing, by being really positive about other cultures, by openly saying positive things. I mean, I say to my students who only speaks English, and they all put their hands up, and I said, well, you know, if an alien came along, they wouldn't want you weirdos because you only speak English, and that's very unusual for human beings. Most human beings are bilingual. And I think it's kind of making people feel comfortable with recognizing that we are all different and that's okay. And respect is about finding out about each other, challenging things. I mean, the things that Rachel and John and Mish have talked about, we didn't know this stuff at the beginning. It's because we've made mistakes. You know, I remember arriving in Manchester and going into a shop and saying, do you sell bacon? And the shopkeeper laughing at me going, this is Rusholme. All the shopkeepers here are Muslim. We're never going to sell bacon. And we go, oh, really? Why is that? You know, but I found something out, and it's okay to make mistakes as long as you take it on the chin and move on with that, and realize that learning is a journey. And I think John and Rachel have talked a lot about being on a journey, and I think that's a great way of seeing it. You will make mistakes. You'll put your foot in it. You won't know things when you start to get on this stuff. And isn't that exciting? Isn't that thrilling to find out? You know, I'm jealous of people who don't know all this stuff, because you're really going to enjoy finding it out. So I think just be really positive about the fact that we're not all the same, and how boring would it be if everyone were the same. So I love diversity. I love talking to students and people training to be my profession. And I think no matter how little you know, that's so encouraging.
John, have you got any pearls of wisdom that you'd like to impart?
Well, what am I going to do strategically? I think a focus is to kind of look at places where privilege may be implicit. So looking at policies, trying to work within the physiotherapy profession, working alongside the CSP to try and understand perhaps the Chartered Society of Physiotherapy, but also in my own institution and kind of how that's kind of within the workplace. I mean, that's the serious bit. I suppose that's the bit, because I think really trying to get underneath some of the you know, I'll carry on with the stuff with the students and work in the class and curriculum, but it's the underneath stuff that also needs to be turned up, shone a light on, to kind of reveal how racist something might be. Or let's not just say racist, it's about any kind of ism, okay, racism, ableism, ageism, and phobias too. So it's just trying to unpick and see how something might be discriminatory in any way. So that's what I think strategically. But personally, and I wish I could recommend this to everyone, get on a flight and go somewhere you've never been before. And don't just go on a package holiday. Plonk yourself down somewhere and go walking and have a look. I wish I could just say that, because that's how I've learnt a lot. Just pack my bags, gone somewhere, not had an agenda, not gone to a particular place, and just walked and sat down and talked to people when I've been in different places. And that has helped me. But I wish I could say that now, but that's not appropriate.
COVID times, be COVID secure.
Rachel, what about you? Any other things that you're looking to do over the next couple of months?
I suppose the positions that I'm in, the positions of influence, it would be just to, I suppose everything I've just said, and stay true to it. So I said this on one of the podcasts, like, if I'm not doing this in a year's time, you need to call us out. So it's about making sure there's representation on any panel or any organisation that I sit within that represents the population of people that we serve and that we work alongside, and that's at all levels of what I do. That definitely that's going to be a journey, because I can't be the only change agent in that, but by being responsible and being kind, but being authoritative with it and being relentless with it, like Mish says, it's not just the one tweet or the one email, it's consistency in your approach. Now, the younger generation, or the newly qualified generation, because there's lots of mature students that go to university, it is a little bit easier for you, because you can have those organic conversations with your peers, with your colleagues, with your patients. You have that sense of, you know, freshness about you to do that. For the managers that are listening to this, the constant question that I get asked is, everyone will notice I've changed. If I start doing things like this, everyone will be like, oh, you've changed, or you're just doing it now because of X, or it's like tokenistic. And I said, but again, that's just you coming out of your comfortable zone and doing something that's different. And when you're consistent with it, people will realise that it's genuine and that it is part of your change as the manager, being the non-racist manager, rather than accepting it. And this is the only reason, or the only way, that institutional racism and systemic racism will be changed. I don't think we'll ever be free of it in our lifetime, I have to say. I would love that to be like the golden vision, but if we can all do those little changes from within, then organisations will stand out. We've got the Stonewall list. Organisations will stand out that aren't inclusive, and I will not go and work for an organisation that is not inclusive. It's someone at my level. I hope that's answered your question. I think don't be fearful of the fear factor, and just doing nothing is not an option. And I really hope that people climbing the ladder in our professions now will be unable to do so like we've been able to do for centuries, myself included, without being anti-racist. And that's where, John, the policies come in. That's where Mish, the Equality Act, has to change. And then Sean, people like you need to have a better platform to be able to get your voice heard with regards to language, communication, culture, everything like that. So we all need to work together. And if we think about across the HPs, that's what we need to do much better than what we're doing now. And I think we've all started to do that, haven't we? Like, we're all here today as OTs, speeches, physios, but let's continue to do that, and do that within your organisation. Brilliant.
Yeah.
Mish, any closing thoughts from you, Mish?
I'm in a way so lucky that I decided to raise my head above the parapet. Otherwise I wouldn't have met all you guys, you know. Not known how much support there is, how much the same frustrations there is, how much the same battles we're going through, but also the successes we're going through, because we are here and we are doing it. I guess I love Anne Bishop's practical guidance, 5 steps, she says, doesn't she, to allyship. And she says very clearly and very strongly, it's an action. It's not just reading. It's not just getting more information and soaking it in. It's not just standing side by side. It's about action. And I'm just going to read to you those 5 points, which I think are motivating and quite clear points. She says 5 steps to becoming an ally. This is Anne Bishop, 2015. 1, understanding oppression, knowing that the personal is political. 2, understanding different oppressions, because it's not just one. There are many different types. 3, consciousness and healing. You have to make those bad patterns of actions, policies and procedures, you have to bring them to the forefront, those behaviors, and then only can you start healing, because you've got to know, it's got to be in front of you. 4, becoming a worker in your own liberation. Break the silence, end the shame, share your concerns. 5, becoming that ally, unlearning and being anti in an active way. I think that is it, you know, results, results, results. People are going to come along with you when they see that there is benefit for everybody in being anti-racist. Then they're going to come along with you. Don't fight with the people that are not coming along with you. Pay attention to those people that want to, and grow that collective. Grow it bigger, so the people that don't want to, they got no choice. They got to come with you, because everyone's having fun over there being an anti-racist, and they're not having fun now. They're the ones that are excluded. So be active. Don't just educate, and don't just think about the superficials. Think about those deep, meaningful changes. Results, results, results. Act, act, act.
Can't think of a better sentiment to finish on. And Mish has also really kindly put together a fantastic reading list for anyone that's looking for some reading materials that they can kind of go away and look into as well. So they will be in the show notes for the podcast that you're listening to as well. So if you've really enjoyed today and want to hear from you know, a bit more from the people that we've had on the panel, you might want to see where you can find out about them on social media. So Rachel, where can people find out about you online?
So the first sign point I would love people to go to is our podcast series for changing the culture of conversation. So that's at the YouTube channel at AHP Leader, so Allied Health Professional Leader. Please visit there first. I am on Twitter at AHP Leader, but please go to the YouTube channel first. Thank you.
And I can second that. It's a brilliant series, and I think Mish, you've appeared on that as well, haven't you?
Yes, she was bloody brilliant. She was fantastic. Love her.
And just AHP Leader, there are some things that are not in my topic, but I listen to it and I learn from it, like the one about the critical care was really interesting, and I've got now, it's come up because I subscribed to it, so it's come up on my playlist now for the COVID-19 one, the recent one, and they are very informative and worth time to listen to.
John, where can people find out about you online?
Yeah, first of all, I just want to say thank you for, I feel very privileged to be part of this panel, and thanks for sharing all your thoughts. I've learned a lot tonight too. To find me, you can email me, j.hammond@sgul, that stands for St George's University of London, .kingston.ac.uk, or if you want to follow me on Twitter, it's @JohnIsHappier. Like to be happy.
Brilliant Twitter username. Sean, where can people find you online?
Yes, if you Google me, you can find my University of Manchester page, which has lots of publications about bilingualism, if that's your interest. I am also on Twitter at Sean Pert, SeanPert. And if you'd like to see another podcast where I talk to SLTs of colour, talking about things like racism in the profession and how they feel about it and what they'd like to do about it, then look up at SLT Time. So that's SLT Time. We can't resist a pun, as speeches. And that's a great resource for people if you really want to kind of feel what it's like to be a new starter or a student or somebody who is in a profession that's predominantly white. Brilliant.
And we'll link all of those up in the show notes as well.
And I want to plug that as well, because I've been listening to those as well, and they're very good. I've enjoyed them as well.
They're very funny as well, which is fantastic. They're such
lively
and yeah.
Mish, I'm amazed that you managed to find time to listen to all these and do your PhD as well.
Oh, my PhD. John told me I shouldn't ignore it when I spoke to him.
Mish, where can people find you online?
Yeah, I'm on Twitter at Lecturer Mish. I'm part of BAMEOTUK UK, so we've recently also launched our podcast series, and we're very lucky it got such good views. I think that's what you look at, isn't it, Rachel? Views. And so that's BAMEOTUK UK podcast, but we do that on the YouTube channel, but we also have the Spotify audio one as well, so you can catch us on both platforms. We are actively engaging in lots of different things as well. We're starting to write a book, which we're going to keep secret just for a moment, but we are writing a book. And also we're engaging now. The Royal College of Occupational Therapists is starting to engage, is keeping us at arm's length still, does not want us inside the organisation, which is fine. And we are working with other organisations because there's still underrepresentation of people from global majority populations in research and in policy making. So we are getting involved in that. We're getting much more of a platform and getting more allies as BAMEOTUK UK. And I think that's why I keep saying you need to be a big collective and grow, because people start to listen to you then. Yeah, so yes, lots of things going on. And I'm at London South Bank University, and I'm so lucky to have a manager who's letting us do this, like, break the cycle framework. So we've got a race and cultural equity group, which is for AHP students from the global majority populations. We've just started that one. We're going to have a second meeting. It was great, the first meeting. We're also have just put together the space for our students racialized as white and our academic staff, and that's called the Allyship and Cultural Equity Group. And we're going to launch that on the 27th of November. And we're going to have these separate groups to enable safe space discussion, but we're also going to get these groups together, which is the next phase. But we're going to start off by the safe space discussions and then get together. And then we're going to have outputs to influence the university and hope wider. So lots of things going on.
Fantastic. Brilliant stuff. And you can find me on Twitter. I'm at Ballard-Ridley, BALLARDRIDLEY, and Bridges on Twitter at Bridges Self MGMT. And all's left for me to say is thank you ever so much to all of our panelists. We will be having many more conversations along similar vein. This is not going to be a one-off. We want to keep the conversation going, as I said at the beginning. And thank you all for listening. Yeah, any comments or feedback, then please send them our way. And yeah, thank you very much, everyone.